everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever felt you are under a spell and can't bring more wealth and abundance into your life, then do we have the Awakened Abundance show for you. Today I'll be talking with Derek Rydall, life coach and consultant for Emmy and Oscar award winners and the best-selling author of one of my all-time favorite books on transformation that I quote on the show all the time, Emergence. And today we'll talk about a piece of the Emergence puzzle, about wealth and abundance building, the spells that hold us back, and how to move past our limiting beliefs. That plus we'll talk about white poodles and cold matches, snorkeling gone bad, what to do when you're paralyzed by fear, and who in the world to root for when you're at Ernies Tacos. Gotcha. So welcome back to the show, Derek. Are you ready to shine?
I'm ready to shine bright, man.
Woohoo!
Absolutely.
And you are shining bright. So I can't resist. I didn't go there in our last interview, but I've got to go there today. Can you tell us what happened at Ernies Tacos?
Yeah, that was a moment where I was an actor, and we were doing a process outside of class where I designed this scenario where I was a soldier coming back from the Iraq War, and I wrote her this long love letter from the desert, and
this is just a classmate of yours.
Yeah, and had it delivered, and was dressed in full army camis, army fatigues, showed up, and part of the process of acting that we were learning, it's sort of method, it's fully living alive and real under the imaginary circumstances. So it's not faking, it's allowing yourself to really be there under this circumstance you've designed. And the circumstance was we're in love, we're engaged, and all of this. And then you let yourself go and see where it goes. And as a result of that, we began to talk and share, and I began to talk about how my friend, and this just all arose spontaneously. Like suddenly I had this awareness of my friend dying in my arms in battle, and I shared it with her, and I began to cry, and she began to cry, and then she shared how she was pregnant, and we were going to have a baby, and then we both began to cry again, and then we began to kiss, and then cry some more, and kiss some more, and pretty soon something shifted, and it was no longer acting anymore. It was no longer an imaginary circumstance. It had activated something that was latent in both of us, and I fell in love. And it was funny because there was a moment where the line really blurred for me, where I didn't know if we were acting. I didn't know what. I was just so in it, and I remember it got so intense for her. She's like, "Okay, I got to go now, honey," and I'll see you later after work. And she left. And then as she left, I was like, was that just her parting line of dialogue as she exited stage right?
Yeah.
Or did she really mean it? And I was so confused and so just bedazzled by this experience that just opened up my heart. And that night I was pacing around waiting for the 10 o'clock when she was going to come back. And she never did. And I was just freaking out, called the restaurant where she said she worked. And they're like, oh, there's no Elizabeth working here. And I'm like, oh my God, how could she lie to me? The love of my life. I was just freaking out.
Your subconscious was completely melted and rewired in one evening.
Completely rewired. And I couldn't, it was just so real for me. And ultimately we did get married and have children and all of that. But it was a real lesson in understanding as I began to understand the emergence work and the principles underlying it, that we become what we pretend to be. We become what we live into. Mm-hmm. And most people are waiting for the circumstances to be the thing, and then they'll lean into it. And what I began to understand from the emergence, the revelation that we live in an emergent universe, that it's already here, it's already happening, it's already now. The music is already broadcasting on that station right where we are, but we have to tune into it. We have to lean into it. We have to live into it and live from it, regardless of circumstances. And when you begin to act like you're in love, act like an inspired person, act like life is for you and friendly. Act in a way that's in integrity and that's congruent with truth, with the principles of truth, and with who you really are, and whatever that is trying to emerge. As you begin to live into that and live from that, you activate it. And it's very different because, again, we think life happens to us, but really life happens through us and as us, and it comes from us. Like the oak tree emerges out of the acorn, like the apple tree emerges out of the apple seed. The acorn doesn't attract the oak tree. It doesn't achieve the oak tree. It doesn't make an oak tree happen. It surrenders to the soil. And when the conditions in the soil become congruent with the pattern in the seed, that potential naturally emerges. And what happened in that scene was, an accidental alignment with this beating
Accidental, I'm
impulse.
putting in quotes here.
Yeah, right. We accidentally the desire for love, the desire for connection, the vision of that was definitely in our hearts. And as we just lived into that and surrendered to that, and pretended like that was true, it activated that potential within us. And I began to use that same model as I moved forward in my life to live into whatever was the next stage of my own growth and emergence. And from getting our dream home when we couldn't afford it, to traveling the world when there was no way that was possible, to, ultimately growing a 7-figure transformational coaching business that at the time when the vision emerged was like, that's impossible. How would I ever do that? But again, just continuing to know how to live into that and bring myself into alignment with that, and then begin to activate that potential step by step. So yeah, that was the first time I really caught that principle and began to use it. So it can work for activating your love. It can work for activating your abundance. It can work, life is totally alive, totally expressing, and totally for us. And it's just waiting for us to come into integrity with that and to live from that. And all kinds of wonderful things can happen.
And that's a mighty woohoo!
Yes, indeed.
There's a word that comes up here a bunch, and maybe we'll go back just into your history a little bit more. We'll call it Derek Rydall 101. The word act. And ever since the beginning, from the time that you were starting to become or became a promising actor to your not so actful surrender in the Bahamas over the spiky sea creatures, you have just that acting is such a powerful theme and a metaphor. I'm wondering if you can take us back in time a little bit and walk us forward. And you, even today, you work with actors and actresses.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, action is critical. And a lot of times in spiritual circles or law of attraction strategies or whatever, a lot of times we think if you just see it, feel it, be it, it'll just show up at your front door. And that can absolutely happen. But a lot of times, and we think that action is something separate from, consciousness or mindset, but it's actually a part of it. Action is an extension of your affirmation. Action is a moving affirmation. And when you begin to think of your action, not so much as trying to make something happen, but like an affirmation, it's another way you're making what is always happening welcome. It's another way you're tuning in. It's an extension of your consciousness. It's an extension of your mind. The mind is the body in liquidity, and the body is the mind in solidity. It's all one thing on a spectrum. And so what I found a lot of times is that people might be doing all this great inner work, but they're not acting from that. It's like faith without works is dead. They're not acting from that. They're waiting for something to look a certain way, even though they might be visualizing, affirming, meditating, praying, whatever they're doing. There's still a dimension of them that's waiting. There's still a dimension of them that is waiting for the economy to change, for their job to get better, for them to not feel scared, for them to not feel uncomfortable. There's a belief that, I have to wait for all those things to be aligned, And from the emergence principle, whatever's missing is what you're not giving. Whatever you're waiting for, you're waiting with and actually weighing it down. And so the emergence process and the awakened abundance process is the ultimate weight loss program, WAIT, because you start to really realize, as Gandhi said, you need to be and become the change you want to see in the world. And that's a very active state. On the other side, there are people that are taking lots of action. They're doing lots of things. They're very busy. But internally, they're not moving in the same direction. They are mentally, emotionally, spiritually, vibrationally moving oftentimes in the opposite direction. So, they might be praying or affirming or whatever, but it's from a place of, I don't have it, I don't have it, I don't have it. And what they're saying is, I'm abundant, I'm abundant, I'm abundant. But underneath it, it's, I'm broke, I'm poor, I wish I had more money. And so energetically, spiritually, emotionally, their inner life is not congruent with their outer life. And ultimately, the emergence process and really the way we were designed to bring forth our potential is we have to bring all of those parts of us into integrity. Mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. When those are all moving in the same direction, now we have congruence. Now the cosmic tumbler clicks into place and our life begins to emerge. And this is what the ancient biblical statement meant when it said, where two or more are gathered in agreement in my name and nature, there I am in the midst of them. That's a metaphysical or mystical statement that definitely means when we come together as individuals, like in a group, like on this training, as we are coming together now and we're in an agreement, we're starting to vibrate together in agreement of what's possible. We're literally creating a new attractor field, a new morphic field that's allowing that potential to more readily emerge. But it also represents our internal agreement. When we are in agreement mentally, emotionally, and physically, when our thoughts and our words and our actions agree, align, we activate that potential. Like a radio station, the music is already playing, but only when your dial comes into alignment with that frequency does that station become manifest. Or as I like to say, you have a manifestation. And right? And so that music was always playing. It's right there, but it wasn't manifest in your experience yet until there was alignment or agreement. And that's important to understand because we often think of manifestation as manifesting something that doesn't exist. It's impossible. You can't manifest something that doesn't exist. Manifestation is bringing that which is eternally and perpetually here, making it visible, making it experiential. And this is not mere semantics. If you're trying to manifest something you don't think exists, you're out of alignment with it. And that's why so many people struggle and strive to achieve and attract and manifest because they're coming from a place of, I don't have it, it's not working, it's not happening, I'm broken, I don't have enough. Now let me try to attract, achieve, and make it more happen. And that's very, very difficult. At best, you might will yourself into a bigger paycheck, but you're just going to be broke at a higher income bracket. And that's the challenge. So emergence work and the awakened abundance work is about understanding what it is that's emerging and then how to bring yourself into integrity with that, into alignment with that.
I want to thank you for sharing that. I want to jump in a minute to some of these myths. Before we do that, if we back up one statement in here,
Sure.
I'd love it if you can give an example of us we're doing affirmations, all this different work to try to bring something about, but we're not taking, quote, action. What does that action look like? Because I don't think you're saying go out and buy yourself the Porsche to prove that you're abundant. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, not necessarily, although that could be the next step in your journey. Like I remember I'd always wanted a Mercedes and it was crazy. I could never afford it, whatever. And I also bumped into a lot of the ideas of, oh, that's not spiritual. That's why, that's just so greedy or selfish or shallow or whatever the case may be. And I began to realize that was just pure judgment. You know, there's the spirit, the consciousness doesn't make any judgment or discernment between a Mercedes, a Ferrari, or a Pinto, you know, a Toyota. It's all an expression, and there's no lack of abundance. And if it's joyful and creative and fun and enlivening, and the life would love nothing better than for you to express that way. And the only reason it created all this baggage in me was because of these shadows and misunderstandings of wealth and money, and that somehow I was taking away from someone else, and that there wasn't enough to go around, and all these false zero-sum game kind of concepts that have been perpetuated through our limited economic models and limited religious understandings, and just a lot of false beliefs and ideas. And as I began to clear away that, and we can certainly talk more about that because it's one of the key struggle points for a lot of heart-centered, spiritually minded people, I realized that it's all symbolic. It just represented for me a life of abundance, a life of luxury, a life of having all of my needs met abundantly. And I began to move in that direction and activate the consciousness, to activate Mercedes consciousness and to live into that. And there was a moment where, in order for me to be authentic, in order for me to live into that vision as if it really was true, there was a moment where the next honest, logical step was to go and start really searching for my car. And at first, even then, I couldn't afford it, according to my idea. But the act of now, most people then would stop there. They wouldn't even search. They wouldn't even go to a dealer. They wouldn't even begin to live into, as we were talking about earlier, they wouldn't even begin to live into that scenario. They would instead wait until all the pictures seemed to be supporting that, the money, the whatever. And that's a big mistake. And so there's always a next step. So I began to go to the dealers, look at them, talk to them, research them and that would bring up another level of doubt or fear or whatever. And I would work with that. I would integrate that. I would activate more of the consciousness of abundance and the vision of who I was if I was living that, and go back to the dealer. And then one day it was just clear. I could feel the yes. It was a yes, but it was definitely a yes. Oh my God, what are you thinking? What are you doing? But there was this resonance. We all know what that feels like. There's this resonance. It's just, you can just feel it, but it's got these layers of protection and limitation and separation. And I realized from some earlier experience that I needed to say yes to my yes, that all the magic happens when you start saying yes to your yes. And so I did it. I bought it. And I remember driving home that night and looking at the Mercedes symbol, and it was like activating all of this stuff in me, all this abundance, all this sense of confidence. And then it also brought up more of the fear and more of the doubt. But as I kept doing the work that we talk about in my emergence work and the awaken abundance work, I continued to integrate myself around my yes until eventually I owned that new level of consciousness or abundance. And more work started showing up, more opportunities started showing up. And my life, instead of me waiting for my life to match my desires, or waiting for, my life began to shape itself around my actions, around my commitment. And I never looked back from that I never went back to that same level. And this has happened in many areas, where we wanted our next level of dream home. The first time we wanted a dream home, and it was impossible. And we began to live into it, do the work that I talk about, have a vision, activate the vision, really come into the feeling tone of it, begin to bring the sense of character that you would be if you were living it, and fill out the environment that we were in currently as if we were already there, and began to live in our little apartment as if it was our dream home. And then from there, it began to expand. It was like, okay, it's time to go looking now. And so we started going and looking at dream homes and talking to the realtors and having picnics in the park near the dream homes and playing in the little kids' room with our son. And at some point, and then we'd come back to our little apartment, cross over the threshold, and it would feel like, ugh, it's so small and dark compared to that. And then that would show me all the places in me where I still wasn't totally aligned. And so I would do the work, bring the joy, bring the gratitude, fill out the home we were in, brought colorful flowers, and then go back looking at our dream home, and then come back and back. And one day I crossed the threshold of my apartment, and the feeling was the same as it was when I was in the dream home. Like, and I'm getting chills even as I speak right now, because it was like there was no difference. And a couple of things happened in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer needed the dream home. I was living in it, in consciousness, in my heart. I was so fulfilled, so satisfied. And a few days later, I was sitting in my office, and all of a sudden it was like the veil parted, and I could see that we would have it, that we could have it, and how we could have it. And within about 2 months from that moment, we were moving into our dream home that was impossible just a few months before that. So this has happened over and over and over again at different levels. But it was critical that we moved into action, that we took that energy and lived into it, pretended, played house, all those things, like in that experience at Ernies Tacos, had to live into that vision. And that's what began to activate it. So many people are waiting, again, you want to start a business or write a book or launch your coaching practice or create that work of art or whatever it is. And so many people are waiting to have all the answers before they really live into it, not understanding that the answers you seek will not and cannot come until you're on the journey toward it. It's like sitting in your car looking at your GPS and going, well, I'll start driving when you give me all the directions. Well, it's not going to do that until you start driving. And then it goes turn left, turn right, but you have to be moving towards it. So action is a critical component to that.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm sensing people are listening, and they're taking quick notes. All right, we've got to change up the flowers in the house. We've got to add this. We've got to live it. Let's
Yes.
talk about a few of the subconscious barriers or myths or spells, and we'll jump to one. I was telling you off air beforehand, we recently had on Dr. Dane here on the show. We were talking about wealth and abundance making. And he goes, let's be clear. What we're talking about is bringing more money into our lives. So after we did this beautiful interview, I went and came up with a great title and said, no, let's not put abundance in the title. Let's put money in the title. And it tanked.
Yes.
Nobody in our audience wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole when it said how to have more money. When I switched it to abundance and got away from money, then it's okay for us to look at it.
Yes. It's huge, man. It's a huge hypnotic spell that we're under. And there's a couple things I want to just clarify as we move into this. The first thing we have to understand is, what is the real nature of wealth? Mm-hmm. Wealth is not dollar bills, stocks and bonds and all that. It's not money. Money is a symbol of wealth. Just like the fruit on a tree is not the wealth of the tree. The fruit is the symbolic expression of the tree's wealth. Mm-hmm. And that's why when all the fruit is gone, the farmer doesn't look at the trees barren of fruit and go, well, these trees are all broke, let's cut them down. No, that's why the farmer doesn't hoard the fruit, is like afraid to give it away. What if there's no more fruit? Because the farmer knows the fruit isn't the wealth. It's just a symbol. The wealth is the invisible process within the tree that produces harvest after harvest after harvest, as long as you nurture the root. So it's not the fruit, it's the root. And when you nurture the root, which is planted in the soil, then it produces a harvest after harvest in due season. And so it's very important that we understand that dollar bills, money, these are symbols of wealth. It's like the goose and the golden egg. It's producing all these golden eggs, and the people get greedy and think, ooh, let's just cut open the goose and get all the gold out. And they cut open the goose, and there's nothing in there but goose. The goose itself was the source, was connected to the source, and through its own alchemical process was turning it into gold. That was the symbol of wealth. But the wealth was invisible and was within the goose. Your wealth is in you. It's about learning how to no longer lean on resources, but how to lean on the source. which is within you. It's invisible, it's spiritual, it's energetic, and it's inexhaustible. And when you learn how to tap into the inexhaustible source of abundance, then it will start to transmute and translate itself into dollars and cabbages and kings and whatever is needed in your life. So, so that's the first thing to understand. And that's, by the way, what the real meaning is of that old saying, money is the root of all evil, which is one of the reasons why people have this baggage. The whole saying is the love of money is the root of all evil. And what it's saying, now you understand in context, it's not saying that money's a problem in and of itself. It's just a symbol. Again, it's money today, dollar bills, but years ago it was chickens. You would trade chickens as a symbol of wealth. You wouldn't say the love of chickens is the root of all evil. Maybe certain kind of chicken love is not so cool, but basically,
I never thought, Derek, we'd be talking about cutting open geese and love of chickens.
Chicken love.
Chicken
never
love.
thought we'd go to chicken love, man. But hey, you never know when you're talking to me. The love of furs is the root of all evil. And, in Roman days, it was salt. Salt was what Romans were paid in. Mm-hmm. That's where the word salary comes from. It comes from the same root as salt. So there's been many forms of wealth: salt, cabbages, furs, eggs, chickens, whatever. They're all symbols and they keep changing. But wealth, real wealth, is spiritual and invisible and infinite and inexhaustible. And so what it's really saying in that sentence is the love of the symbols of wealth is the root of all evil. When you fall in love with the symbol and you think the dollar bill or the stock or the bond or the boss or the job is your source, you begin to give your power away to that. You begin to become attached to that, and you contort yourself into all kinds of crazy positions to try to get what you think you don't have or hold on to what you're afraid they're going to take away, because you've unwittingly fallen in love with the symbols of wealth and instead of falling in love with the source of wealth, which is within you. So that's the first thing you got to understand. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
How do we start to rewrite the subconscious when, let's say, money is starting to come into us, and all of a sudden we are even embarrassed to share about it because of this guilt, or you're not supposed to talk about money at the dinner table, or this feeling that, well, if people know that I have money, then I'm a greedy person, and it gets completely muddied as to how we wrestle our subconscious around this.
Yeah, so what you're talking about are shadows, what I call money shadows or wealth shadows. And a shadow is basically, as you're developing and growing, you have a bunch of experiences. And based on your experience, you develop a particular perception. So like, for example, if you were growing up in an environment where you heard the religious teachings of money is the root of all evil, or you heard your parents talking, or whatever your culture that was saying, oh, those rich people, they're so mean or insensitive or uncaring. They don't, or, you kind of heard from religious things, you need to, poverty is next to godliness or whatever. And you began to decide that wanting what you want, or maybe you were just naturally asking for what you wanted and asking for as much as you wanted and demanding what you wanted as a child, which is healthy, and you got judged or punished or shamed. Don't you know there's starving kids in China? How can you be so selfish? Don't you see how busy mommy is? All you think about is yourself, whatever. And you got the message that it was wrong to want for yourself. It was wrong to take care of yourself. It was wrong to want a lot. All of those were natural, healthy impulses, but they got shamed or judged or attacked. And so from a survival mechanism, you decided and basically developed a map of reality, which said there's not enough to go around. It's wrong and bad to be selfish. It's wrong and bad to want what you want and want a lot of it. It hurts people, and eventually they'll reject you and you won't be loved and you'll die, and you develop this map of reality and then a survival kit to make it in that world of lack, limitation, etc. And so that part of you, the selfish, needy, greedy, stingy, demanding part of you, got suppressed and became part of your shadow. And to compensate, then you have to develop a counterbalance. So you developed, I'm going to be more selfless, more giving, more generous, more helpful, et cetera, et cetera. So you begin to develop the opposites of that because that's what you believed was necessary to be loved, to be good, and to survive in the world. Now, this all happens at an unconscious level. And now you go off and you begin to build this way of life that's based on not being the selfish, greedy, needy, stingy, bad, mean, rich person or whatever. And you become this loving, kind, generous, helpful, do-gooder, caretaker, etc. Right? Now, the good news is that that really serves you for a while. Like, you really do become that. You really do develop that. It's a blessing. It's what's called the gift of the shadow. But at a certain point in your unfoldment, that growth curve runs its course. And you've developed your heart, you've developed your generosity, and you're a good, heartful, selfless, giving person. But now you're bumping into this whole other part of you that's been rejected. And that's the what you might call the selfish, needy, greedy, part of you. And when I work with people, I help you to, and then here's how it gets even worse. You get into like a spiritual teaching or a self-help teaching, and it tells you that you want to get rid of the selfish, needy, greedy, bad person. You want to just try to be more loving, more spiritual, more whatever. And that's actually missing what's the point of what's really needing to be embraced. Instead, you need to actually turn around and embrace the selfish, needy, greedy part of you. And what you'll discover when you embrace that quote unquote dark side of you is that it is really the more light in potential. That when you embrace your selfish self and fall in love with him or her and integrate it, you don't become selfish. You become more capable of truly caring for yourself, of truly filling yourself up. And as a result of that, you start to activate the law of circulation. Mm-hmm. Because the law of circulation says you can't give what you don't really have. So if you don't have and aren't filling yourself up and you're just giving, you're going to start to feel resentful, burned out, overwhelmed, angry, depressed. And I know many of you listening can relate if that's your scenario. And you just think, I just need to be more loving, more giving, whatever. No, you have to actually embrace your selfish self. And that allows you to fill yourself up. Now you have something real and something more to give, to circulate. And that starts to expand your consciousness and your capacity. And then you also learn to open and receive, and that completes the circuit. And abundance and wealth creation is directly correlated to the volume and velocity of energy you're circulating in your life. And in fact, the word affluence, mm-hmm. which means rich and abundant, comes from the root that means to flow into. And the word currency, which we think of as money, comes from the root current, which means to flow. So the greater the current and the flow of energy and circulation coming from you to you, like a complete breath cycle, the greater that, the greater currency and affluence you have in your life, and it shows up as abundance. And if it's more money you need, that's what shows up. If it's more opportunity, that's what shows up. And it shows up as wealth in every area of your life. But embracing this part of you that you've rejected is one of the most powerful pieces of growth. And when you step out and start to claim your wealth and money and success, and you feel all that shame or guilt or fear or yuckiness come up, that's the moment where the real work begins. That's the moment where a real transformation begins. Because ultimately, your desire or need for more wealth and more money is really not about money. At the end of the day, the end of the year, and the end of a lifetime, the only thing that really matters to your soul is not how many possessions you have, but how much greater possession you have of yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you learn how to embrace these things in the pursuit of wealth and, name, fame, and fortune, but you do it from this integrated emergence framework, you don't just have more money. Like I used to say, it wasn't just that more money came out, but more of me got to come out. more of my true potential, more of my true brilliance, more of my true purpose. And so you end up having all the abundance as a byproduct or a fruit of more of you expressing in the world. Ultimately, at the end of the day, real wealth and abundance is how much more of you is expressing, how much more of your love, your joy, your creativity, your genius, your excellence, your generosity. Again, it's all energy. The more of that that's being generated and circulated, the more and more life will claim more and more territory for you to express. And we call that abundance or wealth or success.
Woohoo! Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!